What's up, everybody? Welcome to our panel. If you're standing up, I invite y'all to come and grab a seat. If you're roaming around the back, come and grab a seat. We're going to have a good time talking about faith, entertainment, how we keep our faith true, active, and alive in a world that is not that, right? The entertainment world has all kinds of other pulls, certainly commerce-focused money, not to mention all the other things, but it's how can we maintain a strong faith in a world that's basically trying to pull us in the opposite direction all the time. So hey, everybody in the back, if y'all want to come and grab a seat, please come and do that. We'd love to have you here with us. And to everybody, save your questions. I'm going to try to make sure I leave time at the end. We'll pass the mic around, and we can get some questions answered for you guys, because y'all don't just want to hear us yap. I know we're going to make this thing interactive. So if at any moment you want to scream out and heckle us, y'all good with heckling? We're totally good with heckling. We're totally good with heckling. All right, let me introduce the panel to y'all, and then we're going to go ahead and I'm going to let them tell their origin story, but I do want y'all to know we have an author, a choreographer, and a musician here with us. So this is a very diverse panel. Jeff Yang is right here. He is an author. Columnist. For a long time, you wrote basically how Asian pop culture influenced regular pop culture, right? How the Asian, and then, but y'all might know him also as Hudson's dad. So his son was the star of Fresh Off the Boat on ABC. So we're gonna get into that here in a little bit. My brother Bradley Rapier here. He is a Emmy-nominated choreographer. He'll be heading to California next week to see if he takes home a statue. He's done all kinds of different things. With a movie y'all may know, La La Land. He was a choreographer for that. Yes. I mean, come on. Come on. And let's see, also the founder of Group Theory, right? Which is, I'm going to have you explain that in a little bit. And then here on the end, we have Israel Houghton, who is a Grammy Award-winning musician, producer, worship leader, who brought the house down last night, is my understanding. Were any of y'all here last night? The goat! That comes from Joe in the back. The goat. So y'all are standing in the presence of greatness, guys. So y'all, thank y'all very much. Like I said, lock some questions away. We want to make sure that we get y'all's questions answered. But I'm going to toss it over to the panel, and we'll kind of go down. I think important, especially for people who are trying to break in. I like origin stories because they're, we watch all kind of origin story movies, but we all have an origin story of how God placed us where we are. So let's go down the row. Jeff, let's start with you. How'd you get into it?
All right. Well, thank you so much, and thank you, SVC, for having us here. I literally flew in about an hour ago. Again, boy, are my arms tired. But I'm here on the stage to tell the story not just of myself, but also of my son and what it was like being a parent, obviously, of a child who was kind of pulled into a landscape full of landmines, full of opportunity, and how that changed our lives, but how we did our best to sort of preserve our identities and our faith within that. I am from New York originally, live in Los Angeles now. Again, I moved not for my career, but for my son's. I am the son of Taiwanese immigrants, and the things that they were most concerned about when I was growing up was that I preserved my faith and that I do well in school. That education was kind of at the center of their expectations for me. And when I graduated from college, I did the first of many disappointments to them by telling them I wanted to pursue writing as a career. They were like, what a terrible waste of an Ivy League education. This is not what we came to this country for and sacrificed so much. We know how difficult it is to pursue a job that is as uncertain and as volatile as this. And we will support you as we can, but we hope that you understand there's always an opportunity for you to come back into the light, right? Go to law school.
Yeah.
But I spent years struggling as a writer, of course, eventually writing for first the Village Voice and the San Francisco Chronicle, and then the Wall Street Journal, and through it all, documenting the evolution of a world that was getting smaller in many ways, that was globalizing, where we were looking at each other and recognizing that entertainment itself was evolving to accommodate a greater diversity of voices and a global way of telling stories. It was kind of shocking when my then 8-year-old son came home from school one day and said, "Hey, Dad, I know you write a lot about television. How can I get on TV?" And I said to him, "You don't even practice piano. Why do you want to be on TV?" And his response was, non-committal, and I probed a little longer, and it became really clear to me that he wanted to be on TV to impress a girl in his class. Not a bad reason to be on TV, the many reasons one might be on TV. But as a result, I said, look, my parents, they gave me the margin of error to make the mistake of pursuing a creative career. I have to do the same for my son. But I've got to do so in a way that protects him. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take him, bring him to an audition. He's going to see how hard it is. And it'll all burn out, He'll be back on, a flight path that's a little more recognizable for even a second-generation Asian parent. And so I took him to this audition for this mysterious show that was looking for 3 young Asian kids. And he actually was auditioning for the middle kid, who was supposed to be like very calm and polite and sort of clean cut, because he was only 8 years old, turning 9, and that's the age range they were looking for. So he does the audition, rolls out, and he seemed very happy with it. A few days later, I got a text from a guy named Eddie Huang, who's an author, best-selling author of a memoir of his life called Fresh Off the Boat. And he said, "Hey, did your son just audition for my show?" And I had interviewed Eddie in the past, so he had my text number. And I said, maybe. The show, they changed the title of it. They called it Far East Orlando. They changed all the names, I guess, to protect the innocent. And he said, "Oh, look, this kid, he rolls in, he's like 50% mouth, 50% hair, and he's like just talking about his dad, who's a writer for the Wall Street Journal, and kind of bragging about it." And I was like, "Hey, how many Wall Street Journal writers are there whose last name is Yang?" Not many. So I put 2 and 2 together and decided to reach out to you. And I just want to let you know, your son is totally wrong for that role. And I said, "Well, he's never acted before. I mean, be kind, right?" He said, no, I'm not saying he's not good. I'm saying he's auditioning for the wrong role. And so Eddie actually set up a separate audition for him to come back in to audition for a role that was supposed to be 10 to 12 years old, right? But unexpectedly, we found ourselves on a plane flying to Los Angeles for chemistry reads. They had 5 kids for each of these 3 boy roles, and every hour they let go one set of kids.
Oh no!
And at the end of it, this sort of
Survivor.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's like,
ouch!
Who was left on the island?
Yeah, Hunger Games.
The Hunger Games, exactly. So my particular tribute was left on the Hunger Games, and after that we spent 6 years in Hollywood, navigating all the challenges that exist as a single father with a pair of kids in an industry that's not very good to young people. So that was our origin story.
Wow. So he got the first role he auditioned. Well, second technically, first project that he auditioned for.
Yeah.
It's hard to teach a kid about the grind to success when they nail it the first time.
I was, the whole time was talking about, you're going to have to learn how to be a good bartender, and
Yeah.
He rolls out of the chemistry read having basically gotten the role, and he literally turned to me and said, "Dad, I thought you said this was supposed to be hard."
It's all right. He'll learn other hard lessons. Yeah. He'll learn other hard lessons for sure. That's awesome, yeah. I've got a lot of questions, but let's jump down to Bradley.
Yeah, so is this one working? Yeah, can you hear me?
We on? Hot mic, live mic? Swap it.
Swap, thank you. First, I just have to make one correction. So I've been able to choreograph a lot of things. I am nominated for an Emmy, but I did not choreograph La La Land. I'm in it.
You're in it?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
I'm in the opening scene on the freeway.
He's in it. That's just a school.
That's just a school. Well, Mandy Moore, who choreographed it, she's awesome. Love Mandy. She's amazing. But the short. So in terms of how I'm here right now, I grew up in Canada. I'm a Canadian. Any Canadians? No, I don't think so. Oh, my gosh.
Hey.
All right. Let's get that maple syrup going. Now, being in Canada, I grew up in a city called Calgary, Alberta. If you ever heard of that, Banff, it's beautiful. So when I grew up there, I was probably the only one in my neighborhood that looked like me with a sweet fro. Well, it's not so sweet anymore, but it used to be like sweet up there, like the man at the back. And so I grew up there, and in that whole time, like you, my father, who came from Grenada, my mother came from another place, another country. The idea was be an academic, be a lawyer, be an engineer. That's just the rule. And I was a smart kid, went to school, dean's list, all that stuff. But basically, I wasn't seeing street dance culture. If you know what street dance culture is, it didn't exist where I lived. I was in Canada. There was cows and there was farms and there was city, but it wasn't near the culture at all. And then in the 11th grade, this guy came into a school dance. My friends knew that I liked to dance a little bit only because my parents did a little bit and I heard jazz from my dad. But really, if you could do this, you could dance because the other guys were not doing that.
That's my kind of dancing right there. I mean, that's the only move I got.
Right there. And so basically, I got to the dance. This guy came in, and this guy hopped on stage and got on stage in the dance that we had at the school, and he gets up there. And he's like locking it up. He's doing all this stuff, and he's like doing all this stuff. Now, we had not seen it. He had learned it from going down to the States. And my friend said, you got to dance against that guy. So I went against him, and I just tried to do this. And it was kind of embarrassing. Well, he remembered me. I'm now at University of Calgary. I'm playing football. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm in Bachelor of Science program. And then he approaches me and says, hey, man, there's a new dance style. I'm down in Long Beach. I've been learning from electric boogaloo's, this style called popping. I want to show it to you. I want you to become part of it. Shows it to me. I get my new hairstyle. My hair stands straight up. And I basically just started following this thing. I had to tell my dad, kind of like situation, Dad, I don't think I'm going to be a doctor. He says, okay, I guess lawyer, right? You like to talk. Maybe engineering. I said, no, I want to do this thing called popping and locking and breaking. And so that's how I got into it. I went through Canada, had some successes and failures and things. Finally, got really blessed that there were some competitions in Canada. I won this Canadian talent search, and the prize was to go to LA and New York, and I won these solo dance things there. And a woman from New York said, you deserve a chance to be in the States. We're going to give you our lawyers and our people so I could become a legal American person that could work here. Cool. So I got to New York. I made my way to LA, met my beautiful wife in acting class, Joni. There she is. And yes, exactly. That's right. There she is. And then what sort of happened from that is that we sort of started a gathering. I was sort of finding that I wasn't finding the culture that I thought I'd be surrounded by very often. Just see people at auditions and not see them around. So we started a gathering on a rooftop in our house. It grew to this movement, formed a group called the Groovaloos, and launched a lot of other groups. We're tied to the Jabwalkies and Beat Freaks and Super Crew. They're all members. We're all in this pot that we are stirring, and they've done obviously amazing things. And then that group then allowed me to lead them onto the TV shows, that maybe we'll talk about, different dance shows and those kind of things. And from there, I then got launched as a choreographer. That kind of took me from LA, Hollywood to Broadway. Worked with some great people. I worked with the director of Hamilton, just amazing, amazing people. And then full circle is I now still am involved in choreography, obviously, as well, which is very exciting. As a matter of fact, the film that I'm nominated for, the director of Hamilton produced that movie, and he brought me back. So that's how I got involved with that. Yeah. And that's relationships, what that's about. And then, but then also what I do now, groove theory is the idea that I take all my experience from street dance, from the really epitome of it, which is the circle, stepping in that circle, which is that idea of why do you get in places, whatever it is, and you're sort of on stage or you're in front of people and now you're kind of be thrust somewhere. Why do we freak out? Why do we get all nervous? All those layers of stepping into community and communication and collaboration. I share the examples to that, so I do like a keynotes through that and bring that to companies and people and all sorts of people for engagement and getting back into the hard things.
That's awesome. I've had the privilege of hearing one of your keynotes, or maybe an abbreviated version, and it was awesome. You got everybody get up, moving around, and had some fun. Yeah. I think he's going to teach us how to pop and lock in a bit or something.
Just takes a couple minutes.
And when you said you got a new haircut, you said it was high. Is that like Kid and Play? That's what I'm thinking. Did you go full Kid and Play?
If I could bring some pictures, no, I didn't have the Kid and Play, okay. But I had the big. I'm talking. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Blowout.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
Then I had sort of, my mother called that kind of the dread fro, kind of mixture. No, I like it. Like kind of the mixture of the fro, but the dreads.
Yeah.
I had that for a long time, and just now it's kind of whatever it is now.
It's good. That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, let's just jump down. Israel.
Yes.
Your turn. Worship leader, Grammy award-winning. So how did your faith journey lead you into this profession?
Into this profession. I was raised in church. I actually have to go back to the beginning. My mother was 17 when she got pregnant with me. My mother's white. My father was black. And she was advised pretty heavily to have an abortion and just kind of move on with her life. She had a big future ahead of her. And she chose to not do that, which is great. And she ended up in Southern California. And when she was 8 months pregnant, she had been doing drugs throughout her whole pregnancy. She was a teenager, and this was, 1971. And the state of California basically informed her, you're an unfit mother, so we're going to take your kid from you when he's born. We've got this family all set up, and this is going to happen. Wow. So I have to fast forward this, but a lady sees my mom across the street, 8 months pregnant, kind of struggling, walks up to her and just says, I don't know you, but I felt like I had to come tell you that Jesus loves you and that you're not forgotten. Wow. Just very bold like that. And my mother just began to cry like she had never heard that. She was raised all her life in a religious environment, religious school, but never had heard, you're loved by God. Just never heard it. And right there gave her life to the Lord. And the crazy thing is, a month later when I was born, there were no drugs in her system anymore. Because when she gave her life to the Lord, she just stopped. And I know that's a miracle. Of course I know that's a miracle, but I think I'm here 53 years later because a stranger crossed the street and talked to another stranger. Wow. And we don't do that as much nowadays, but I'm an advocate for it. I believe there's something very powerful about that. But she ended up marrying my stepfather when I was a year old, and they went into full-time ministry. So I was a pastor's kid, and I was the kid that jumped on the drums at the end of every service and annoyed everybody. And you know that kid? You have that kid in your church? And I was that kid, but my mom sort of recognized he's got something, So they really sort of nurtured that. My dad was like, you're going to be a pastor. And I was like, no, I'm not. So far I'm winning that battle, still winning. I'm still holding on to never.
Yeah. You're pastor adjacent.
I am pastor adjacent.
The blurry line there, Israel. I don't know where.
But I just really felt this drive and connection to helping others find their voice in worship. And the thing that I noticed, at least from my vantage point, having been a black kid in a white family in a Hispanic community my whole life, and I should add, the only black kid in anywhere I looked, school, church, anywhere, for most of my upbringing till I went to school. I remembered going, I see all these sort of siloed Sunday morning things, and people are like, we want this expression over here, we want this expression over here. And I was like, I want something that combines all of that, because that's who I am. And I just, I remember doing my first record and people going, yeah, you don't belong here because we can't put you in a box. You're not black enough for this, but you're not white enough for this. I mean, I know we can chuckle now, but I was literally told that verbatim. And I was like, well, then I'm going to have to do something else because I feel it. I feel what I'm called to. And 30 years later or whatever, we are still doing that.
Wow. Amen.
Still doing that.
Woo. Oh, gosh. All because a lady crossed the street.
All because Charlene Berg crossed the street. Yeah, Charlene.
Give her a shout out. That's amazing. So, guys, thank y'all. I feel very unqualified to be up here on stage with y'all. But I want to bring us back to the heart of the panel, which is, can faith and entertainment coexist? And so, Israel, you're in the Christian world, but that probably presents its own sorts of challenges. Jeff and Bradley, y'all work in the secular world, but you carry your faith with you. So there's a lot of people out there who we have trouble bringing our faith even into the corporate office or into school. And then when you're in the entertainment world, you're like, you're kind of like living gig to gig. If you offend the people in the room, you don't get hired for that next gig, or they write you off like, that guy is kind of a Bible thumper. So how do you balance the two? Can they coexist? And how have you found bringing your faith into what you do? Are you comfortable with it, or is it a challenge? Any of y'all? We don't have to. We don't go 1, 2, 3. Let's have a discussion.
Well, it's pretty awesome. I would say one thing that I find is that I've been both a performer, having to audition, trying to get the roles, trying to being part of a project, and I've been the producer and the choreographer and part of the team. And on both sides, the producers and the people putting on the project, they want the project to be good. Now, they don't always succeed, and sometimes they're way off the rails. But to do that, they all have some faith. You don't start to do any project, whatever it is, without you have some faith that this thing's going to work. And you believe it's going to be great, and then maybe you got bad, counsel and how that goes. So there's a level of faith that just has to be there. And so even myself, and if you're auditioning, you have this faith that you'll be part of something greater than yourself. I have found that when I first got to LA, I went to this thing, and there's a similarity in that. When I was in Canada, I was the only black kid in my area. When I got to the States, I did feel a bit of that, like, I'm not black enough. It's interesting. There's sort of, which is more inside your head. Not that someone did stuff to me necessarily, but I was sensing that I was not the same culture. It was really cultural difference. But when I find that the best way that I've done things, when I first got to LA, for my first few years, I kept wondering, am I good enough Christian? And so I'd go to meetings, maybe in Beverly Hills or whatever, and I'd be thinking, oh gosh, I left that meeting, I didn't say a scripture, I didn't say something about God, and I'd be feeling like I was failing. But whenever I tried to go that way, it was forcing it, and it wouldn't really work. It'd be a bit like you said, well, that guy, let's keep that guy away. Yeah. What I have found is, like, I walk in there and I'm just bringing life, and my way of living is truly stepping in the moment, stepping in the circle, walking in and go, okay, this is who's here. Okay, we're doing this. And getting people to not hide, getting them involved, and seeing there's something great we're going to do. Speaking the vision and sharing the idea, even though it might be about just some scene in a movie. But then that radiates out to, then you can have discussions. And then I'll just share one quick thing that was pretty wild. I worked on, about a decade ago, I was brought in, this famous director named Des McAnuff. He did Jersey Boys and Tommy, just legendary director. And he brought me in New York to do a readaptation. He's bringing back up Jesus Christ Superstar. Now, I loved that movie as a kid. The 1972 movie is classic. The rest of the stuff, forget it. But I knew every song, I knew every lyric. So I go to this thing, and I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be a whole bunch of Christians. This is going to be amazing. And I'm like, I get to where we did it. We developed it in Toronto, then in LA, and then I went to New York. And I'm realizing very quickly that I'm the only one. And that the director is actually an atheist, and that but what happened by just being, well, first of all, it was a great experience because by doing the show, they were basically doing a Bible study. Every time we talked about the show, we would compare it to a scripture because the director had a lot of integrity. He would do that. Even though he thought the movie, it was about just Judas, this man who betrayed a friend, he still went to the scripture. Well, I had so many things that happened because of this idea of relationship, of not worrying about how I'm leading with my knowledge of God and my, thoughts on things. Well, leading with that, but leading with, hey, hi man, how you doing? Hey, and having conversations, getting to know them. Well, then they did come to know that I believe these things because we had a lot of interactions where, for example, the one guy that did a dramaturge, which is where a person comes and helps the people know all the parts and geography and history of the play. As he was talking about the Gospels, he said, well, these guys all contradict themselves. They all kind of, it's a bit. I said, hold on a second. And so I said, imagine 4 friends were together, and they all told a story about you. Well, it'd be kind of different. Well, then they all turned to me and went, oh, you believe this stuff? I said, yes, I do. So then it became this thing. Well, through that process, I'll just say that the lead actor, if you're involved in film, the actors are not supposed to talk to anybody but the director for their direction. Because if your mother says, hey, you should do that scene a little more angry, and then your best friend, then you start messing the whole thing up because the director's like, no, your character plays this thing really humbly, right? If you don't listen to that, the whole movie's toast. Right. But the lead actor, who was playing Jesus, phenomenal guy, he comes up to me and goes, Bradley, I know I'm not supposed to talk to you about this, but I have to sing this song, lyric in the show. I have to sing this line that says, to conquer death, you only have to die. what does that mean, man? So then we'd have lunch. And then Judas, the guy playing Judas was a Jewish guy. We'd go for walks. And the guy playing Herod was very hostile to the whole faith. And we'd get together. And then I made friends with, there were believers in the ensemble. And if I have time, I'll share one. I won't do it now. But if we have time at the end, there's a story that I've just got to share that happened even beyond that, that points to the idea that when you just decide, I'm here. I believe, even when I speak in my group theory and my step in the circle framework, all the training, all the knowledge that we have is so valuable, and all the Bible studies and all that, whatever we have in our understanding. But when we're actually engaging with people, you can't lead with that stuff. I call it leading with the move. And I say it's not the move, it's the groove. If you live your life, if you dance based on moves, you're going to run out of moves. But you connect to that deeper groove, you can dance through life all day. And so when you enter going, okay, they got to know that I'm a great dancer, or that I'm a great musician, or I'm a great author, then you walk in and you're like this. But if you walk in just going, oh, I'm here, I'm trusting that those moves within me, my knowledge, my training, my personality, will come out as it were, but I'm going to be right here. I'm going to be curious about all this stuff. That's how it happens, I think, anywhere. That's kind of the basis of what I think.
That's awesome. Yeah, groove theory. And live in the groove.
I have no groove.
Yes,
but
you do.
I will say this. There is something which really resonates about what you're talking about regarding the entry points you have to speak about faith and to especially provide guidance when there's conversations and narratives about that in the content that you, or in this case my son, is participating in, right? So this story of Fresh Off the Boat was about an immigrant Taiwanese American family who is settling in a world that they don't really recognize, right? They're the only Asian family in a very suburban white environment. And as a result, you know, most of the people in Hollywood, most of the cast and crew, of course, aren't Asian, don't really know what this experience is. They ended up actually reaching out and relying on, much like you were saying, on those of us, who actually lived that experience. And that meant that those of us who were actually Taiwanese American, children of immigrants, ended up being not just parents holding juice boxes for our kids, we were also sources. We were also the people who were kind of providing that context for what's authentic, right? Yeah. In language, in nuance, in custom. And there was an episode, which I thought was particularly fascinating, in which the mother of the family, played by Constance Wu, brilliantly played by Constance Wu, she's not a believer, right? Her character kind of grew up Buddhist, we assume, and then is agnostic or atheist. But her youngest son, played by Ian Chen, encounters Christianity, is invited to church, and all of a sudden, this thing that they do every Sunday, which is go to Costco. Because Asian Americans, we do believe in some things, right? One of them is values, not just, and value, right? And she all of a sudden has this crisis where she wants to allow her child to explore and to make friends and to learn about this thing, but at the same time, she feels like she's losing him. This ritual they have together of going to Costco, eating samples, and exploring the aisles, that is breaking down. And so the executive producers knew about the fact that Hudson and I grew up in the church. I brought Hudson to church on Sundays. Ian also, his family would join us sometimes. And so when they were putting together this episode, they reached out to us and said, we want to make sure we're talking about this from the right way. We want to make sure we're not either going to offend people who are Christian, and especially who are immigrant Christians, right? While at the same time, we want to make sure that it's accessible to people who may not actually know that environment. And it was a nice moment where we were able to share our personal experiences as people were furiously taking down notes and trying to make what we did funny. It's a sitcom after all. But at the same time, knowing that they recognized that our lives beyond the soundstage, the sort of giant warehouse in which we lived 14 hours a day sometimes, that part of our world was as much a part of the story that was being told as the characters that were creating on screen. That was really important. And our show was coming at a time when those stories that were being untold, that were being lived but untold, were finally making it to the screens, right? Fresh Off the Boat, Blackish, right? There was this world of stories and inclusion that was happening. And I'd like to believe that simply by bringing in from the outside people who weren't given that opportunity to see their lives on screen before, those shows were more authentic, more sincere, and worked better. Fresh Off, it wouldn't have lasted 6 seasons without it.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. What I hear from both of you guys is like, be in the room and be ready, right? Live in the groove. Even if you have a groove, I can't pop and lock, but I got a different.
Well,
kind
you know,
of
it's interesting because when I speak group, when I share these analogies with people, I just use this move, the groove, the circle. But when I'm saying group among this audience, I'm speaking God's creation.
Yeah.
I'm talking the authentic interaction with people. I'm talking God's spirit, and that's what you're connecting
That's cool.
to.
I
And
love
getting
that.
people to see that that it's always there.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Israel, I want to get your thoughts because you live inside a world that certainly the banner is we represent Christ, but I've been around long enough to know that like people just call themselves Christian often don't act like Christians. And so do you find this to be hard to keep Christ at the center of what you do because it's still a commercial endeavor. You sell albums, you sell songs, you get book gigs. So what challenges have you found living in that world to keep it authentic?
Well, it's not just that world as a silo for me. I'm also married to someone who's very public as well. Talk show host, actor,
Yeah.
artist, etc.
True.
Your daughter's favorite cheetah girl, most likely. And so there's an expectation sometimes that comes with, well, Israel's a man of God. I can't tell you how many times we've seen these sort of comments online, like, why is your wife dressed like that? I was like, because we're at the beach and she prefers to wear a bathing suit. What is your problem? So you have these kind of weird expectations when your faith is sort of, your
Out there for the
livelihood.
vote, yeah.
And so, it is kind of a tough thing for me. I said to the crowd last night in a panel we were in, one of the things that stood out to me early on, just getting started, was this statement by St. Francis of Assisi, who said, preach the gospel everywhere, and when necessary, if necessary, use words. And I have found myself in more environments than I can remember where I didn't have to say, hey, I'm a gospel artist, or hey, I'm a man of faith, or hey, look at this salt and light I brought to this party. But,
Behold.
right,
Yeah.
I have brought you salt and light to this dark place.
Yeah.
No, but sometimes you just walk and be a human being with people and just go, bro, that hoodie is fire. Where'd you get that?
Canada.
In Canada. Then we start talking about Canada, which right now is a dangerous conversation, but I'm going to let it go. Sorry. I think there is something to be said for, especially in this day and age, living authentically. People see that. My Gen Zers who I parent are saying, they have aura, they have it, they've got that. And I was like, yeah, they're light. They're carrying light wherever they're going. I get that the terminology has changed for that generation, but ultimately, you're carrying who you are, and you got to be willing to give an account of what that is. When you're squeezed by life and, the environment, what's coming out of that, that's what counts in combining faith and entertainment for me.
I want to say one thing about what you mentioned regarding being in the public eye, because I actually think that's one of the most devastating aspects, especially for a young person, to constantly be visible, to be accessible to people you don't know. This is something which I think any of you who have kids or in various kinds of spotlights recognize. But even if you don't, we live in a world right now where nothing is invisible, right? Where the internet remembers everything, where there are cameras all around us, where anything that happens will be seen and maybe shared to the world. And one of the first things that we learned was as soon as you're on TV or as soon as your identity is recognizable, there's a contract that people seem to believe they have with you, to come up to you when you're with your family, to invade your space, to do things which they might not do to just strangers. And again, you're here because a stranger came and invaded your mother's space, and provided her with things she needed to hear to just survive and live. But she wasn't asking your mom for an autograph. She wasn't taking pictures of you when you're uncomfortable with how you're looking. And the biggest thing which I think we had to face up with, I traveled to Los Angeles. We were in New York, when all this happened. Moved to LA. It was just for the first season, myself and my older son. My younger son stayed behind with his mother. And I remember that combination of feeling like we were very alone in this new world, while at the same time feeling like we weren't alone ever. Because he'd be swimming in a pool and people would come over and talk to him, adult strangers asking him things when I wasn't in earshot, and he'd be kind of freaked out. So I will say this, I think that the transaction you make, where part of what being part of entertainment is to gather audiences. You're giving a little piece of your soul to them every single time you perform. And finding a way to preserve that for yourself, and finding a way to preserve that, especially for a minor child, is the most difficult thing in an industry like this. I count the kids who grew up with Hudson and the ways that many of them have gone astray, right? And more often than not, it's because they're trying to find a way to escape the eye of other people.
Something you said that struck me, being in LA. So how many here lived in LA? Anybody here lived in LA? So LA, not LA alone, it happens in many industries, but if you're in the entertainment industry, LA kind of is made to create lone wolves. It just is made that way. You get there, you book a commercial, a video, a film, you get a manager, you get an agent, and you're going, and you're not even trying to be, you get sucked in. And then meetings change from chill gatherings to scoutings. It's like, okay, we're going to talk to him, we're going to talk to her, we're going to talk to her, then we're going to get out of here. And that it just starts to happen like that. And so one of the things that I'm really grateful for, that I believe God led my wife and I on, is I really, the same way you got. When I got to LA, I didn't know anybody. I meet people, I'm very friendly, I can meet people, but I didn't have any family or people to go to. And I actually thought I was going to be surrounded by the culture a lot more than I was. What I mean is, I saw the talent at auditions, at the nightclub, but I thought there'd be one central area where all the dancers got together and just hung out. I don't know what I was thinking. I just thought this picture from Canada. And so it didn't happen. And so we just started, having these gatherings at our place. Yeah. They grew. Now, sometimes it just be one person, then it just sort of grew. And over time, sometimes we have over 50, 60 people, actors, dancers, mostly dancers coming in. But what happened through that was then, again, I didn't think I was doing anything different, but just as you start to do your own things and create a community and start to have things to lead people in your vision, we just started to lead it differently, meaning in street dance culture, for example, it's very common to make the circles and people battle to see who wins. I was like, okay, cool, we're going to do that, but actually, hey, can you help that guy over there? Because that guy actually is trying to learn that thing. Hey, listen, what you did there, if you two did that together, and then all of a sudden, and they're like, who is this guy? This fast-talking Canadian guy. But they started to get the idea that I wanted to be a hangout, that we weren't just coming to another jam session, we were going to hang out, and then over time, I could share vision with them about what we could do together as a company, as a group, telling stories, and in a sense, holding together. And I think this whole thing, I know, I came to faith through a guy in street dance. Your mother had the woman on the street. I was actually living my life. One of the street dancers that was very pivotal in my life, my best friend now, he said, listen, you're a friendly guy. You don't even know who God is? And it's like, I don't know. And, and I had no idea, or not no idea. I knew there was something, but I didn't know Christ, that's for sure. And he led me to Christ. And my life didn't change overnight. I still was doing a lot of knucklehead stuff. I was kind of still a lone wolf a little bit. But it definitely started this fire. And for me, I'm just grateful because I had a lot of my own insecurities. My parents divorced. A lot of stuff you can imagine. Everybody's got family stuff. But I had some pretty intense stuff going on. And for me, specifically, and you might relate to this too in your own ways, because I had to step in this circle, I was on this path to become a doctor and be an academic, which is nothing wrong with that at all. But I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know who I was. And then all of a sudden this culture says, you got to step in the circle. You can't not. You can be in some businesses and sit in the corner and hide behind a screen. In street dance culture, if you want to belong and you go to the jams, you can't say your foot's sore, you don't like the song, I'm not feeling it. You have to go in. So you learn all these things like, gosh, why do I feel like I'm not good enough? Why am I feeling like this is so horrible? Why am I comparing myself? Why am I actually doing it and they think I'm succeeding, but I feel like garbage? And that culture, I believe God used for me to figure out who I was. So it goes back to this faith in entertainment. Like action, they say action cures fear. And things like these statements. Getting involved, stepping into the circle, getting into engagement, worrying about knowing what you believe and trusting that it's going to come out. And you might get a bold statement. God says, say it now. Yeah. That can happen, for sure. But often it's like, a year later, you're talking to someone. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's getting it not, I think, I made it religious in the beginning because I was still figuring it out. And I think the more that it's a relationship and I'm driven by what I feel my interpretation that God's given me to get out. So now that's my faith. I'm like, got to get it out there. And then I attract people that might feel a bit that way, and it might ignite something in them. And the next thing you know, we're kind of bouncing off the walls, and then we can share something more deep. And it kind of goes like that. It's kind of a continual circle that you step into.
Oh, that's awesome. We don't have much time left, but I know that one thing that keeps a lot of people scared, they're in the room, the opportunity opens, and it's fear that locks them up. I'm unprepared. I'm going to get, I'm just going to kind of offend this. They may act nice now, but they're not going to give me the next gig. Have you found that fear to be just totally a made-up attack of the enemy, or it to be actually founded, and how do you navigate it? Or when we're scared to bring up our faith into this room, is that just mostly in our head, and it's the enemy whispering? Or have you found that you actually do get that hostile reaction?
I think that in an industry, as you were saying, Bradley, that where everybody is competing with everybody else, where when you walk into a room, there's a sort of reflexive evaluation of who else is out there, who are they, who are you, what the hierarchy looks like. It's a very terrifying place in a lot of ways to be, and even a harder one to bring a young child into to grow up in. But I will say this: the one thing that I think we were able to hold on to, our church, our faith, our family, both the one we were born into and the one we created, right? The extended family, the village, really, that I think helped to raise all of our kids in a space that was very dangerous and strange. Those things sustained us, God sustained us. And more than anything else within the context of those rooms, what sustained us was just the memory of where we came from, right? So Hudson obviously has been several years out from being on Fresh Off the Boat. He went through COVID, as all of us did, very difficult time for kids. He did get an opportunity to essentially show another side of his world, right? When a set of producers from actually Singapore reached out and said, oh, you know what, Fresh Off the Boat's actually very big in Southeast Asia, believe it or not. We would like to hear if Hudson would like to do a show about himself, right? Some sort of unscripted show. And he said, yeah, I've always wanted to do a food journey show. I've always loved cooking. Wow. And it was my grandmother on my mother's side who taught me how to cook. We didn't speak the same language. She only spoke Chinese. I only spoke English. But the one thing we had in common was food, right? Her cooking and me eating. But when she actually taught him how to cook, the one thing he took out of it was this. She was the only adult that let him make mistakes in the kitchen. He would show up with little cuts on his fingers, with burns. I'd be like, where'd that come from? It's like, I fell down on my fingers. But what he said was, because she was an adult to let him make mistakes, it made him feel more comfortable in a world where you're not allowed to make mistakes. And so the show he's doing right now, it actually premieres tonight on National Geographic. It's called Crash Course Cuisine with Hudson Yang. It's a cooking show that's about learning from mistakes. Most cooking shows don't let you. They mock mistakes, or nothing mistaken is ever happening. But the show begins tonight, and you'll see the first season of it. We're going to be shooting the second season over the summer.
Cool.
But yeah.
That's awesome.
Let mistakes. Awesome. Yeah. God let us make mistakes.
Well,
hopefully the world will too.
Something that you said with the question, I think, Revelation 12:11, the blood of the Lamb and the power of the testimony. So that, to simplify it, we just tell a story. So in terms of what I find effective, as opposed to thinking I have to evangelize or whatever, I just share parts of my story, and usually it's like this happened, that happened. Oh, God did that, and then this happened, that happened. Oh, you wouldn't believe what happened. And how did that happen? Well, I really believe that it was from God. You know, however the audience is, you sort of temper it, but you share what has happened. I find that's the easiest thing, you know, in terms of sharing. You were saying, how do you share? Rather than thinking I'm going to share from a pulpit, I'm just going to say, oh, you know what? You made me think of this time, when my wife and I, we almost lost our house and this thing happened. It was crazy. And you start telling the story, and then next thing you know, they go, why? Well, man, I think this woman, it was totally God. And what do you mean it was totally God? Boom. You know what I mean? And then you're talking. So I find it's just remembering our stories. It actually says that's the defense against how we attack things and how we share and how we strengthen others is the power of our testimony, the blood of the Lamb. That's the two keys right there. So just keep sharing the stories.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I think I'm fascinated by autobiographies. I'm fascinated by guys who kind of tell their memoirs toward the end of their life. And there's always sort of this common thread of like, I wish I had this understanding in my 20s. I wish I had known I could have avoided so much of the stuff. And I'm thinking about, now with the advent of social media being like the thing, like how many things we sort of paralyze ourselves from expecting this is what's going to happen, as opposed to the thing that's going to get me in the door and keep me in the room is me being genuine and authentic. Me trying to shapeshift may not keep me in this game very long. So sending messages to my 20-year-old self that says, hey, when you're 50, when you're 40, how about instead of wasting a decade of your life trying to please people, why don't you figure out who's your team, who's your people, who are your non-negotiables in life, hang with them and let everything else be its thing. I think when I look at this question, faith and entertainment, can they coexist? They have to.
Yeah.
they have to. And so if we're gonna make inroads in the creative space and we're people of faith, then we have to learn the language of Babylon. One, we have to learn how does this thing work, or we're gonna get decapitated daily. But if we can get in there and sort of understand how the sausage is made, so to speak, then God, like he raised up Daniel and raised up Joseph's in places of power and infiltrate, with that knowledge. That's the kind of stuff that I get excited about. And I think we all share in common here for sure.
That's a good thing to end on right there. Y'all give it up for our panel.